Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody joining us. My name is Peter Prengaman. I'm the news director for climate and environment for the Associated Press. I'm excited to host today's episode of RF Breakthrough, Global Voices, Green Choices, Women Leading Climate Solutions. Now, we know that climate change is a global issue, and we hear a lot about big picture solutions needed to address the crisis. But really, that's only part of the problem. Climate impacts are also community level issues that are threatening vulnerable populations and exacerbating existing inequalities, particularly for women. For example, one recent study showed that women have experienced a 260% increase in heat related economic losses in recent years compared to 76% for men. And by 2030, up to 3.9 billion people are expected to experience hazardous or severe climate induced events. Not only are women some of the most impacted, but they are also at the forefront of solving many climate related problems. So their voices need to be heard, embraced, and empowered. Today, I'm honored to be joined by a panel of women leaders on climate from the Vital Voices Leaders Network. They have all championed climate solutions at the community level. First, I'd like to welcome Nidhi Pant. Nidhi is the co-founder of Science for Society, whose award-winning technology is helping women farmers profit from surplus produce. She and her colleagues recently won the Earthshot Prize for their outstanding work. Also joining us is Habiba Ali. Habiba is a pioneer in renewable energy for Africa. Habiba is CEO and founder of Sosai Renewable Energies, an organization offering energy alternatives to empower women and young people. And finally, we're joined by Gina Barbieri. Gina specializes in conflict resolution and inclusive accountability for international development institutions. She has served as the inaugural ombudsman for the WWF International and principal ombudsman for the World Bank Group. Nidhi, Habiba, and Gina, thank you all for being here. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. And I want to invite all of you, our audience, to join the conversation. Just comment below or post using the hashtag RF Breakthrough. All right, to get things started, I want to ask each one of you to talk a little bit about your climate story and how it connects to your work. Nidhi, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. I was born in the Himalayas to a family of farmers. Uh, in our village, the situation got worsened due to climate, continuous floods, as well as landslide, forced my family to migrate to Bombay, which is city, and leave back uh, our families as well as communities in my village, and that actually led me to found Science for Society, where we use scientific knowledge in service of people. So we provide affordable renewable energy technologies as well as market linkages to smallholder farmers. So my personal climate journey has been that I was born in a unstable environment, and I saw it very closely how it affected my family and communities, and led me to uh, pursue chemical engineering so I can use my scientific knowledge in rebuilding my community.
All right, thank you. Habiba, how about you?
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, and I'm glad I'm able to be here. I hope I'm clear enough. So my climate story is it's linked to health as well. I got to find out one day while working on deforestation and how the loss of woodland in Nigeria was causing a lot of deforestation because Nigeria loses 420 hectares of woodland every year to deforestation, which in essence causes desertification and with the attendant climate effects. And in that work, I got to find out that just staying by an open fire or a kerosene lantern for 2 hours, you would have smoked an equivalent of a pack of cigarette. And growing up with a mother who owned a roadside restaurant where we cooked on the open fire by the light of a kerosene lantern, I just could imagine the packs of cigarette my parents and I had actually inhaled in our lifetime when we never actually smoked. And that just drove me to start thinking, what are the options that I could give people to reduce this effect? And luckily, the work I was doing was working with an improved cook stove that was saving 2.9 tons of CO2 per annum per stove. And I was able to continue my work in deploying that stove. But this showing that by staying by a kerosene lantern, which is one fuel that everybody uses when women sell by the roadside in the night, they use the kerosene lantern, sell bread, sell food, and I still buy from these women. For me, that was quite scary. Even though my mom was no longer doing that, it just kept ringing in my head that somebody had to do something about that. And I bought some solar lanterns and I replaced for the women. And it wouldn't leave my brain simply because I had lost my sister about a year or two before that time. And just remembering and thinking about the breathing issues she had also scared me. But in the long run, each solar lantern that I'm able to replace a kerosene lantern with has the power to save, even if it is just 1 point of light, it saves about 1.2 tons of CO2 per annum, because each gallon of kerosene emits about 27 kilograms of CO2 per annum. And if you use it in a kerosene lantern, you're inadvertently emitting CO2 every time you use it. But then it also helps with the health of the women.
Thank you. Thank you. Gina?
Great, thanks, Peter and Rockefeller Foundation Vital Voices for inviting me to participate, and it's a privilege to be speaking to all of you alongside my sisters Habiba and Nidhi about climate and climate impacts. My focus in this area really is driven from a human rights perspective. I got into the field of accountability and focusing on development impacts from a human rights lens, through a human rights lens. And for the last 12 years have been thinking how best do we ensure that communities are benefiting and not being unnecessarily harmed by our drive to provide development aid and now climate finance for communities. So I think from my perspective, looking at the multilateral development agencies, we've seen a real shift and a very quick pivot toward climate financing. And so teams that were typically looking at how to support and invest in infrastructure, oil and gas, extractive industries, now being asked to find bankable projects in renewable energy. And so watching that take place and being encouraged by the extent to which finance is going to be made available. As we know, we need to shift toward green energy, and thinking through what do those impacts look like and how do we make sure that communities are not inadvertently harmed as we make this big push in that sector. So really looking forward to this conversation where we can look at bridging, the global and the local.
Well, Gina, that leads me to my next question. As we all know, COP28 is coming up, right, where people around the world come together to talk about a lot of these issues, and aiming to, abate climate change and get us on a different path. Let me ask each one of you. I mean, one, if you're going, and two, whether or not you're going, what you hope will come out of it. Why don't we start with you, Habiba?
So for me, every time I've ever since I started working in this space, one of the biggest projects I've ever done was to deploy improved cook stoves that was saving, like I said, 2.9 tons of CO2, and we did 60,000 of that. It was a registered UNFCCC CDM project, which is what people loosely call carbon finance now. And this was a project that I ran, I think, between 2016 and 2017, displacing a lot of open fireplaces and all of that, and getting a lot of women businesses to do. But in the long run, I'm thinking that's just a drop in the ocean of all that is happening when it comes to emissions in the global world. I feel that there's been a lot of talk about what finance can do when it comes to reduction of the climate effects. I'm thinking of what can action do, and I'm looking at it that how do we marry the right kind of financing to the right kind of action that is community driven, community led, and just ensuring that a just transition from unhealthy fires is taken to, like, healthy electricity and energy supply for people. So I'm hoping that at this COP, for once, I mean, in spite of all the talk, let us actually talk of something that will involve more of community-led transition. Because if we do all the work up there and we're not involving the people who are down there, who really need to switch fuels, use the right technologies, and constantly be aware, then I think there's a lot to be done. Especially if I look at Africa, where over 70% of the people live in the rural communities. So I think it's quite key for us to really drill down to how do we make all the big finances, the Global Climate Fund, all of that really make sense to the person down there in the community.
Thank you. Nidhi, how about you?
My aim is to ensure that the concerns of the most vulnerable population, the farmers, and the most vulnerable nations are heard by the convening countries, by financial institutions and civil society, and their challenges and concerns are discussed thoroughly. And with our work, we want to present more evidence on how climate adaptation and being the communities being more resilient can improve faster transition for all the farmers, and more funding comes to global south for us to achieve and make our communities more climate resilient. So my hope is, first, to discuss our challenges, second is to find partners and financiers for us to collaborate together, and third is to also know right mechanisms through which we measure this resilience and adaptation. So, what are different impact measurement matrices that we can deploy in showing these evidence based results to accelerate more funding into into climate adaptation?
Okay. And Gina?
Yeah, I mean, no surprises. I think mine aligned very closely with Habiba's. I'm very curious to see the extent to which we're able to ensure that these big moves by the climate funders, whether it's philanthropic organizations, whether it's banks, whether it's equity funds moving into the space of climate, how do we ensure that those financing models not only upstream upstream reflect the needs of community driven in how they are designed and developed, but also downstream, that we're thinking very carefully about ensuring appropriate accountability systems in place for any unintended consequences and harms to communities. And that I'm hoping we can start moving away from what we see in the international development arena as a particularly paternal approach toward how these decisions are being taken, and really be true to the call for inclusivity, and to what extent we can start really piloting an innovative financials which place communities in the driving seat around both the allocation of funds and the spending of funds, and then the addressing of harms when and if they occur.
All right. Yeah, I hear all of you touching, in one form or another on climate finance. This is something that we at the Associated Press will be looking at really closely. I think it's going to be a big theme of this COP. All right. Well, for the next question, I want to go to you, Habiba. Climate is often talked about in the big picture, 1.5 degrees, or limiting warming to 1.5 degrees since pre-industrial times, sea level rise, glaciers disappearing. Your work really lifts up communities at their level with clean appliances, cooking solutions, solar generators. How do you connect your work to the global conversation about climate action? Do you think we spend enough time talking about local solutions?
Well, I think they spend a little bit of time, not too much. I think a lot more will be better, because as is now, and I wouldn't say it's because there's not enough attention to it, as much as I think it is just not being focused right. When I say focused right, a lot of the financing that is coming is also looking for revenue. So nobody is really thinking about going to areas where it is much needed. For example, most of the financing coming is going towards, say, CNI. When I say CNI, commercial and industrial solutions, because everybody who wants to put money into the renewable energy sector wants to make it back in quick time. Their payback period needs to be so short. But if I want to give solutions to communities, I need patient capital, because these are people who live, quote and unquote, below $2 a day. And living below $2 a day, that's like what, $60 in a month. And you're telling them to buy a technology which the cheapest could go as high as $10. I mean, that's not priority for them. They would rather, revert back to whatever it is they are doing. So if you ask me, I would say that there needs to be more work done, because as much as I agree that the global south does not emit as much as the global north is when it comes to climate emissions, we're going to suffer the most when these effects start happening. So we need to start already thinking about the right kind of adaptation practices, and mitigation we're beyond it, but for me, adaptation practices that would actually help these people. And this also takes great effect in when it comes to the kind of technologies they use. You can't expect somebody who has lost all of the trees in her backyard to be able to continue using firewood to cook. She needs to, rise above that and go to a cleaner fuel, or even a clean fuel like an LPG or an electric cooker. But she can't afford the technology. So how do we ensure that you take away that 2 tons of CO2 she emits every year on her cook stove, and multiply that by a community of 100 people, and replace it with a technology that saves everything that she's using, and then she's able to cook clean, have better health. All the attendant benefits that come to replacing these technologies. So for me, it speaks very well when carbon finance was the intent to show that, yes, we're actually reducing, but there needs to be a way that makes it happen, that makes it really big, and people look at it like not just something they can make money off quickly, but something that they could do. For me, impact capital that speaks beyond just getting returns, but is patient enough to wait for the returns to come.
I like what you said there, patience capital and then impact capital. I was going to follow up and say to you, well, how do you articulate that argument, to people who finance things? But I think you answered my question, and that is explain, how much this helps somebody in a community personally, but then also how much collectively those kind of changes help the climate, right?
Exactly. So if you look at it, it's not just about that one technology or that one solution that you provide to that person. It's about the global effect in the long run. And the number of people that you're saving, the number of children that you're saving, the number of, the amount of trees that can actually regrow and come back into the community. And then when you think about electricity as well, now a lot of people in Nigeria, even in rural areas, for example, are using generators for powering their homes, for lighting and everything. And like I shared earlier, every fossil fuel you use emits at least 27 kilograms of CO2 per gallon, which is a 4-liter thing. And so imagine the number of households that are actually burning 4 gallons or 5 gallons in a week, and multiply that per maybe 200 community member community. It all adds up, right? And so imagine that I'm able to deploy a solar powered mini grid to that same community that eliminates everything. Like, it's zero. Everybody has electricity to light up their homes. All they have to do is pay a little bit of money. But then for me as a company to be able to implement that technology, I will need the kind of financing that will understand that these people may not be able to pay as quickly as I want, but will be able to pay in the long run. So how patient can you be to wait for that, so that you can actually help in saying, this is also my contribution to protecting our climate?
Yeah, and thank you. And that leads me to my next question for you, Nidhi. Your group, Science for Society, supports entrepreneurs in India with good planet technology that reduces food waste and CO2. But these solutions are also good for business. So there's like both things there, right? Can you tell us why it's so important to consider financial and market needs for clean solutions, and why the flip side of that, why isn't green itself good enough?
Yes, I think the biggest thing to consider there is who are you working with? Like, what is the persona of the people that we are working with? So specifically for smallholder farmers, their decision to take us to switch to a technology or to adapt to a technology first depends on how it changes their lives. What does it do to them? Does it help them increase their income? Does it help them save money? Does that increase their yield? So for them, for their decision making, it needs to first have a business case. That means it needs to change something in their lives monetarily, because they're already below the poverty line. For them, their first priority is to not fluctuate, be in and out of poverty, but to really have that orbit shifting switch and have and come out of poverty. So for them, the biggest priority for all smallholder farmers is first to have a market linked solution, which is there a, I will adapt to your technology, but what does it do to them? So our solar powered food processing equipments help them make these food ingredients that they can sell to large corporates like Sodexo, IRC, Indian Railways. So they have a market for what is the output of the technology. So there is a strong business case on why they should adopt to this technology, which is not only climate friendly but also is helping them earn an assured additional income, doubling down their household income. Second thing, which is the most important, is that today this feasibility of manufacturing is happening at the village level only because there is renewable energy available which can be deployed there. For us to have apart from renewable energy, there is not much solution, there is not much electricity that is there in these villages so that they can independently start any work that enhances their livelihoods. So two things that any clean technology is solving for them is first on feasibility, that due to solar powered equipments they can today start any new business, start an allied business, and not only have uh, not only depend on farming, which is more unpredictable, which is making them more and more vulnerable because of climate change. And second is because of this additional income, because of this feasibility and the additional income, it is making them more climate resilient. More money gives them more power to fight all of the climate related vulnerabilities that they have. So these are the two major reasons why the farmers we are seeing more and more adoption to more cleaner technologies, apart from they being good to.
I think we might have had a little bit of a technical difficulty. We'll come right back to her. Gina, let me go to you. You know, we just heard two examples of community-driven projects that really are making a difference in these regions and collectively in a larger sense for the climate. Do you find that community voices are being heard when large-scale decisions about climate are being made? So I guess that's my first question is whether you think that that's happening at the level that it needs to. And then the second is just to talk a little bit about the importance of having those voices at the table, and maybe could give us an example of how you've seen this work and be successful.
Yeah, great. Thanks. It's a great question, Peter. And I think, yes, there are certainly developments in shoring up the way in which we engage with communities to inform financial flows and decisions being taken by the big development agencies. I do think there's a lot more that we can do because we need to start moving beyond this idea that we can check the box on stakeholder engagement and move ahead with financing and funding projects. And then if there are any negative impacts or there's non-sustainability of the projects for whatever reason, we deal with that as a risk that we can then somehow mitigate. So I'm looking forward to us being able to advance those conversations and think about community voice, not just being a stakeholder engagement piece, but actually community voice to really inform decision making around how projects are financed and what projects are financed. I think when I think about some of the large scale conflicts that I've been engaged in around development projects, whether it's a mining company, displacement of communities to make way for hydropower programs, those issues that are being raised around consultation, environmental and social impacts are not dissimilar to the same kinds of concerns we're starting to see around large footprint renewable projects, whether it's wind farms, solar farms, and so on. And I think we have to get a lot better at ensuring not only community voice in terms of impacts that are being experienced, but how do we make sure community voices are heard at the decision-making tables, at the boardroom tables. It comes back to, Habiba's point around patient capital. Not many of our financial institutions are wired in a way that can accommodate anything other than shareholder return. So how do we incentivize institutions to care about the needs of communities and ensure that those needs are then accommodated in the financing and funding models? So institutions willing to listen, but then also to be able to absorb what they hear and adjust course and be responsive in a meaningful way. Because I think that's then when we start to become able to deliver on an inclusive climate transition agenda.
Yeah, you make an interesting point in thinking about green energy projects and sometimes how slow they are to roll out because of permitting issues, because of disputes and stuff. But I think one of the issues here is something you point to, and that is making sure that the communities in any area are part of these discussions, from the get-go, because their voices need to be incorporated, and ultimately that helps speed the decision of whether or not that there'll be a project in a certain area and how it's implemented. So I agree. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry,
Peter,
you were going to say something?
Yeah. There's also a lot of data now available that indicates improved sustainability of projects. So when we're thinking about, well, how do what is the business case for ensuring that funders care about communities, speak to communities, involve and engage communities? There's enough data now that indicates that is how one enhances the sustainability of your project, whether that is a renewable energies project, whether it's an extractives project, and so on. So I think we do need to recognize that there is this idea of global good matters when it comes to trying to influence the funding agendas of these financial institutions.
Absolutely. Habiba, let me go back to you for a minute. In other interviews, you've said that the thought and concern over your mother cooking over a smoky open fire helped push you to innovate in this area. And you talked a little bit about this in your introduction. So here's my question. I mean, clean cooking is this enormous initiative by itself. Why expand your work into other areas of renewable energy solutions, and how do those ideas connect, what you've done with cooking and some of the other areas you're trying to move in?
Okay, so for me, my work started, like I shared, with working with an organization that was deploying cook stoves for a CDM project. But as I went into the communities, I found out that it went beyond just cooking. Cooking is a huge energy resource. And, I feel that energy for cooking is the easiest to, convert people to. But the major problem is that when you solve the cooking problem, then there's another problem rising. There's the energy problem. There's the people do not have light to see. They don't have light to do, anything else. The women, like Nidhi shared, where you find that people want to have businesses to work. They want to do other things, right? And as you go into the community and solve one problem, and you do another needs assessment, you find that people come back to you. You don't even need to do another needs assessment. You don't even need to consciously do a design thinking process. It just come to you again and say, now we have you helped us solve this one, so we want the next one. And everybody just keeps coming to you like that. And I look at the work that I do, or we do in my community, in my organization, that it's not about providing energy for the people. It is making better lives happen for people in communities. And we're in the business of doing good for the society, and whatever solution that we can use in helping to make sure that good happens in the long run, it also transcends just the one person that we're helping, but the community as a whole. Then I think I can go to bed happy. So I want to be that person. I see us like that organization that will help communities transit from every unhealthy solution to a cleaner solution. And it's all about affordable, reliable energy anyway, which is a key point in the Sustainable Development Goals, and also is one aspect that if you solve is about 60% of climate solutions being solved.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you. Nidhi, I want to go to you. Part of your work at S4S involves training female farmers. How do you see this aspect of your work as influencing climate response in the communities that you work with?
Empowering women is a big part in making them making the communities more climate resilient because of three ways. First is that, giving an example, in India, 60% of the agricultural workforce is women. If we leave them behind, or we don't focus on them with giving them the right combination of skills, capital, as well as decision making, we will leave behind a bigger set of population who will drive these climate adaptation as they are the frontline workers. So any activity that happens at a village level or at a community level has deep engagement with women, at least being the executor of that action or decision, and now they need to be at the decision making position. Second is that empowering women also empowers the entire household as well as community, because she's involved in the process, from food till the education of their children, of their families, their caregivers in India. So giving the money, making that more resilient is most important, because that will help them to become champions for the climate change, for them to fight at the as the climate change warriors. So it's important that they are given more asset, so that they can in some way or the other work towards improving the livelihoods of their families as well as their communities. It's important to give them voice, so that they have more decision making powers, or on how to spend, what to spend, and how to fight this. They need skill sets on how to fight the whole climate crisis. And the third important part is that they take care of themselves, which is, if a woman, which is body, which is, if they take care of themselves, they will also be as they take care of the entire family, it will also make the entire community more prosperous. So for us, it's very important to empower women with right asset, body, and voice.
Thank you. And that leads me to my next question for you, Gina. You, Nidhi, and Habiba are all part of the Vital Voices Global Network of Women Climate Leaders. Tell us, especially after hearing, from the two of them today, what do women bring to the fight against climate change that men might not? And why is it important that there's inclusiveness at the decision-making table?
Thanks, Peter. I actually don't know if that's a helpful question to ask. To be quite frank, I mean, no doubt it's wonderful to hear from Habiba and Nidhi how they are responding to the needs of the community. So nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "I want to be a climate leader." I think on this call, all of us have woken up in the morning and said, "There's a need that we need to address," and we start addressing that need, and that has taken us into these various spaces. Now, I'm not going to argue that that's a gender-specific responsiveness, but it's interesting to me that that's why we're all here and why we're all on this call. I think the right question for me in this regard is to say, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And the problem we're trying to solve for is climate change. And we know that the data is clear. Women and girls are disproportionately impacted by climate change. We also know that if you want to solve a problem effectively, you have to have the right people at the table. And so with that in mind, we know that we have to involve women. We have to ensure that women are at all the negotiation tables. We have to ensure that there are strong pipelines of women who are capacitated, able, and willing and wanting to engage and represent their communities in these conversations around climate impacts and what can be done to address those. So I think women, no doubt, have an important role to play. And I think that women are underrepresented. I've worked in many, many communities where, because of the societal norms of those communities, women don't typically stand up and volunteer and participate. And we have to find a way where it is appropriate to ensure their inclusivity, where they are wanting to include. And it is, to me, it is about choice. If women choose to engage, let's make sure that we're there to support them, to build their skills and capacities to engage and to have voice. Because, as I've said, if we are wanting to sustainably resolve the climate crisis, we have to involve women.
Yeah, no, I think that really goes to the heart of the question too. Not that women do things better or differently, or but if women are impacted, everybody's impacted. Everybody needs to be at the table, and I think we've seen historically that hasn't always been the case, particularly at the international level of summit negotiations. Well, to finish up, I want to ask all of you two things. The first is I want to go back to COP a little bit because it's coming up. COP is a really important time of year, and ask you, what's your hope for COP28? What's one thing that you hope is approved, is agreed upon in the final language? So that's the first question for you. And then the second question is more personal, and in your own work, what you hope to accomplish, in 2024. It's this time of the year where we start to think about next year, So why don't we start with you, Gina? We'll start with you. What you hope COP28 and in your own work in 2024.
Great, thanks, Peter. I'm hoping to come away inspired by through seeing hopeful initiatives, and I think for me, when I think about what I've seen around the impacts of development projects, it can't be business as usual when we think about how to support, through global support of local community projects. How do we ensure that we're getting better at doing that in a meaningful way, avoiding harms to communities and being accountable for those harms where they occur? So that would be, one of my hopes is to see some really innovative thinking around funding models, financing models, where we are able to bridge the global finance agenda with local demands and needs. And then also I'd like to see more conversation around the nexus between peace and security and climate financing, because it feels that those are still conversations that are happening in a silo. And we know that without stable communities, peaceful communities, it's very difficult to affect any development change, whether that's climate or otherwise. So I'm hoping to see more of a cross-thematic conversation taking place in that regard. And then lastly, of course, because of my interest in mediation, problem solving, and negotiation, I would really like there to be a firm commitment to the establishment and strengthening of women-led networks of facilitators and mediators across the globe that can influence the climate agenda in a meaningful way.
And for you next year, what about, your personal things that just in your own work? Or maybe that's all part of that.
Some of those, So I think some of those asks are indicative of where I'd like to start spending a lot more of my time and energy.
Okay, fair enough. Habiba, how about you?
Okay, so earlier we spoke about women and how they do better than men or not, I don't know, in ensuring climate practices happen and all of that. But the truth is, when women take on something, they do it till the point that they win, And what I've seen and I've experienced in this space in all of my years in business is the kind of financing that goes towards women-led activities is not as much as the one. It's like a teeny weeny bit of what goes to men. And in the long run, you hear about how men get this kind of large amounts of money to carry on climate change projects, and which maybe or maybe not you do not see it in existence. But I feel that the tiniest money the woman gets to do something, she does this big project. I mean, I can testify to that. So I'm hoping that we can actually have a situation where, in discussing about financing at the COP, people are able to, investors, financiers, impact investors especially, are able to put more funding into women, back more women in doing climate change work. I mean, that is going to be a very catalyzing effect, have a very catalyzing effect. I honestly believe that. And for me, it leads on to what I'm going to do next year, because currently I was lucky to have gotten almost $1 million from USTDA to do feasibility studies across 100 communities in 3 states in Nigeria, which is going to ensure that over 100,000 women have businesses that they are doing that are powered by renewable energies. And I just want to develop these projects and make them happen. The results are in. Now we're just seeking the financing to start implementing the projects. We clustered the projects into 4. One of the clusters has been funded by one of my longtime partners from the Netherlands, and I need the remaining 3 projects to be funded. So I think this is going to take all of my energy, all of next year, and deploying the solutions, making sure the women are getting the businesses, powering the communities, and making sure that the right kind of technologies are being deployed. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Nidhi, you want to take us home?
Yes, I believe that to fully address the climate crisis, there needs to be more funding towards adaptation to climate change. So we need to support communities, local organizations. We don't need leadership only from the government, but for climate, for private sector to invest on more climate smart agriculture, more projects that help communities adapt to climate change. So my major takeaway from this COP28 is major focus for this COP28 is to have more funding for climate adaptation. And the takeaways that I would have from COP28, my goal is that in 2024 we ourselves spend more time, energy, and efforts to help farmers adapt to climate change. Our focus earlier was to deploy technologies that can mitigate the climate change, but now have more and more efforts towards helping them adapt to climate crisis.
Thank you. Well, in closing, I want to thank our panelists, Nidhi Pant, co-founder of Science for Society, Habiba Ali, CEO and founder, Sosai Renewable Energies, and Gina Barbieri, specialist in inclusive development and accountability. To the audience out there, please comment below or use the hashtag RFBreakthrough. And thank you to the Rockefeller Foundation for setting this up. My name is Peter Prengaman. I am the Global Climate and Environment News Director for Associated Press. Thank you all for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.